The day started like any other at Ridgeview High School. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet parking lot as students hurried to their classes. Among them was Mr. Charles Henderson, the school's janitor, a man who had worked tirelessly for over 2 decades, ensuring the halls were spotless and the classrooms ready for learning. Mr. Henderson was a familiar face to everyone at Ridgeview, known for his kind smile and his habit of whistling cheerful tunes as he worked. But what most people didn't know was that beneath his friendly demeanor, Mr. Henderson carried a heavy burden. For years, he had been struggling to make ends meet. His old, beaten-down car, which he relied on to get to work, was on its last leg, breaking down more often than not. But Mr. Henderson never complained. He showed up every day, quietly doing his job, and greeting everyone with a warmth that made even the busiest of students pause for a moment to say hello. Among those students was Barron Trump. Quiet and reserved, Barron wasn't the type to draw attention to himself. Despite his famous last name, he blended into the fabric of the school, forming friendships and focusing on his studies like any other teenager. But Barron had a keen eye for detail, and over the years, he had noticed Mr. Henderson's struggles. He had seen the janitor walking to work on days when his car gave out, and he had overheard bits and pieces of conversations about the sacrifices Mr. Henderson had made to provide for his family. One chilly morning, as Barron entered the school, he saw Mr. Henderson outside, attempting to jump-start his car in the parking lot. The sight tugged at Barron's heart. He watched as the janitor, with grease-streaked hands and a weary expression, struggled to bring the old car back to life. It was in that moment that Barron made a decision, one that would change both their lives forever. What happened next would leave the entire school stunned and many in tears. It wasn't just the act itself, but the story behind it that resonated with everyone who heard it. It was a story of kindness, gratitude, and the unexpected ways in which lives can intersect. But before we get to that, let's rewind a bit and take a closer look at the events that led up to this life-changing moment. Stay tuned, because this story is about to take a turn that will touch your heart in ways you won't see coming. Mr. Henderson's life had never been easy. Born and raised in a small town, he had learned the value of hard work at an early age. His father was a factory worker, and his mother juggled 2 part-time jobs to keep food on the table. Despite their struggles, his family had always been close-knit, teaching him the importance of resilience and kindness. That upbringing shaped Mr. Henderson into the man he was, a man who believed in doing his best no matter the circumstances, even if it meant putting his own needs on the back burner. At Ridgeview High, he was more than just the janitor. He was the silent hero who fixed broken lockers, mopped up messes before anyone noticed, and stayed late to make sure everything was just right for the next day. To many students, he was a comforting presence. He never hesitated to offer a listening ear or a word of encouragement. But what most didn't know was that behind his unwavering smile was a man carrying the weight of the world. His wife, Mary, had fallen ill a few years ago, and their medical bills had piled up. Their daughter, Sophie, was in college, working part-time jobs to help with tuition, but even that wasn't enough. Mr. Henderson had sold most of his prized possessions to keep the family afloat. His car, a rusted-out sedan with a cracked windshield and a sputtering engine, was all he had left. Yet no matter how hard things got, he never let his personal struggles show. He was a man of quiet dignity, finding joy in the little things, like watching the students he cared for grow and thrive. Barron had been one of those students who noticed the little things. While many saw Mr. Henderson as just another staff member, Barron saw him as someone with a story that deserved to be heard. Over the years, he had watched the janitor go above and beyond, not for recognition, but because he truly cared. Barron often saw him chatting with students who seemed down or helping teachers carry heavy loads without a second thought. He admired Mr. Henderson's humility and kindness, but he also noticed the exhaustion in the man's eyes and the way he always seemed to rush out at the end of the day, as if he had a million other responsibilities waiting for him. That morning in the parking lot, as Barron watched Mr. Henderson struggle with his car, something inside him clicked. He couldn't shake the image from his mind as he walked to class. Throughout the day, he found himself thinking about the janitor's unwavering dedication and how much he deserved a break, a real break. Barron wasn't the type to act impulsively, but this felt different. It felt right. After school, Barron went home and started researching. He knew his family's name came with certain privileges, and while he had always tried to stay humble and grounded, this felt like the right time to use those privileges to help someone who truly deserved it. He didn't want to make a grand spectacle out of it. He just wanted to do something meaningful for a man who had given so much to others without expecting anything in return. But Barron also knew he couldn't do this alone. He reached out to a few trusted friends and quietly shared his plan. Together, they brainstormed ideas and figured out the best way to make it happen. They decided to keep things under wraps, wanting the gesture to come as a complete surprise to Mr. Henderson. The more they planned, the more excited Barron became. He could already imagine the look on Mr. Henderson's face when he saw what they had in store. Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson's days went on as usual, though the strain of his responsibilities was beginning to take a toll. His car broke down more frequently, forcing him to rely on public transportation, or on particularly bad days, walk several miles to work. But even then, he never let his hardships affect his attitude. He continued to greet everyone with a smile, finding solace in the routine of his work. Unbeknownst to him, Barron and his friends were working behind the scenes to pull off something extraordinary. Every day after school, they coordinated calls and made arrangements, carefully selecting a vehicle that would not only be reliable, but also a symbol of the respect and admiration they had for Mr. Henderson. Barron even dipped into his own savings to contribute to the cause, determined to make sure everything was perfect. As the pieces began falling into place, the excitement grew. The group decided to unveil the surprise during an upcoming school assembly, where the entire student body and staff would be present. They wanted everyone to see just how much Mr. Henderson meant to the school community. But as the day of the reveal approached, Barron couldn't shake a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Would Mr. Henderson accept the gesture? Would he understand how much he was appreciated? The night before the assembly, Barron barely slept. His mind raced with thoughts about how the janitor's life might change, and whether this one act of kindness could make a lasting impact. Little did he know, the events about to unfold would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved, creating ripples of compassion and gratitude that would resonate far beyond Ridgeview High. The stage was set, the plan was in motion, and all that was left was to wait for the moment when Mr. Henderson's life would take an unexpected turn, one that would leave him, and everyone else, speechless. The day of the school assembly finally arrived, and there was an air of excitement buzzing through the halls of Ridgeview High. Students whispered to one another, teachers exchanged knowing smiles, and Barron did his best to keep his nerves in check. Everything had been carefully planned, and now it was time to put their efforts into action. The assembly hall was packed, with students filling every seat and teachers lining the walls. Mr. Henderson, as always, stood near the back, ready to clean up after the event once it was over. He had no idea he was about to be the center of attention. The principal stepped onto the stage, welcoming everyone and beginning what seemed like a standard assembly. But just as the students began to settle into their routine announcements, the principal paused and said, Before we continue, we'd like to take a moment to honor someone very special to this school. Someone who works tirelessly behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly. Someone who has touched countless lives with his kindness and dedication. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Mr. Henderson. Confused and slightly embarrassed, Mr. Henderson looked around, unsure of what was happening. The principal gestured for him to come to the stage. Reluctantly, and with the encouragement of a few students nearby, he made his way forward, his face a mix of surprise and humility. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as Mr. Henderson stepped onto the stage. Barron, seated near the front, felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. He stood up, taking a deep breath, and walked onto the stage to join Mr. Henderson. The janitor looked at him with confusion, his brows furrowing as if to ask, "What is going on?" Barron took the microphone and began to speak. "Mr. Henderson, for years you've been more than just a janitor to all of us. You've been a mentor, a friend, and someone who always puts others before yourself. We've seen the sacrifices you've made, the challenges you've faced, and yet you've never stopped showing up for us with a smile on your face. Today, we want to show you how much you mean to us." Barron gestured toward the side of the stage, and the curtain was pulled back, revealing a brand new SUV, decorated with balloons and a large bow. The room erupted into gasps, cheers, and applause. Mr. Henderson stood frozen, his hands covering his mouth as tears welled up in his eyes. The shock and disbelief were written all over his face. "This is for you," Barron continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We know how much you've been through, and we hope this will make your life just a little bit easier. It's our way of saying thank you for everything you've done for us." Tears streamed down Mr. Henderson's face as he looked at the SUV, then back at Barron and the students who had made this possible. For a moment, he was speechless, overwhelmed by the generosity and love being shown to him. Finally, he managed to say, "I don't even know what to say. This is more than I ever could have dreamed of. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." The students and staff rose to their feet, giving Mr. Henderson a standing ovation. It was a moment filled with emotion, one that would be remembered by everyone in the room for years to come. Barron handed Mr. Henderson the keys, and the janitor's hands trembled as he held them. He hugged Barron tightly, whispering, "You have no idea how much this means to me." As the applause continued, Barron stepped back, letting Mr. Henderson have his moment. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that this act of kindness had made a real difference in someone's life. For Mr. Henderson, the SUV wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there are people who care. In the days that followed, the story of Mr. Henderson's surprise spread beyond the school, touching the hearts of people in the community and beyond. It became a powerful reminder of the impact of compassion and the importance of looking out for one another. And as for Mr. Henderson, his life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became a little brighter. With his new SUV, he no longer had to worry about breaking down on his way to work or walking miles in the cold. More than that, he carried with him the knowledge that he was valued and appreciated, a feeling that gave him the strength to keep going. In the end, it wasn't just about the SUV. It was about the love and gratitude of a school community coming together to lift up one of their own. And for everyone who witnessed it, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the most extraordinary moments.